Attention grabber, Bumpy Johnson, the Godfather of Harlem.
In the dark corners of Harlem, beneath the flashing neon lights, the jazz clubs, and the soul of Black America's cultural rise, there walked a man feared and respected, a man who fought the mob, stood against corruption, and carved his name in the history of New York's streets. Some called him a criminal, some called him a hero, but everyone called him Bumpy Johnson. This is the story of the Godfather of Harlem, the man who lived between the shadows of crime and the light of justice. He was born Ellsworth Raymond Johnson in 1905 in the small town of Charleston, South Carolina. Young Ellsworth grew up poor in the Jim Crow South, where the color of his skin was both a curse and a target. When he was just 10 years old, his family moved to Harlem, a neighborhood that was fast becoming the epicenter of Black culture, but also of poverty and organized crime. It was here, in the crowded streets of Harlem, that young Ellsworth earned his nickname. He had a noticeable bump on the back of his head, and from that day forward, the world would know him as Bumpy. Life in Harlem wasn't easy. Bumpy struggled in school, often clashing with teachers. By his teens, he was caught up in petty crime, running errands for gangsters, and serving time in juvenile detention centers. He wanted more than just survival, but the world offered him little. No education, no equal opportunities, no fair chance. So Bumpy Johnson did what so many young Black men of that era felt forced to do. He turned to the streets. The 1930s, Harlem was alive with jazz, poetry, and Black excellence. But beneath the music, the Italian Mafia controlled everything. The rackets, the numbers game, the protection money. It was in this world that Bumpy Johnson met Stephanie St. Clair, known as the Queen of Numbers. She ran Harlem's underground lottery, a business the Italian mob wanted to steal. Bumpy became her right-hand man, her bodyguard, her enforcer. And when Lucky Luciano's Mafia came knocking, it was Bumpy Johnson who stood in the way. This wasn't just about money. It was about Harlem's dignity, about protecting his people from outsiders who sought to exploit them. Bumpy Johnson quickly rose to power, earning a reputation as both a gangster and a folk hero. He negotiated peace with the Italian mob, something unheard of for a Black man in 1930s New York. He controlled Harlem's streets for decades, but unlike most crime bosses, Bumpy used his influence to uplift his community. He gave money to families in need. He bought books for children. He made sure rent was paid when fathers were jobless. To the police, he was a criminal. To Harlem, he was a king. Yet every king has shadows. Bumpy Johnson's empire was built on crime, gambling, extortion, drugs. Critics argue that while he gave back to Harlem, he also poisoned it with addiction and fear. The FBI called him one of the most dangerous men in New York, and his rivals called him untouchable. One of his most famous lines came during a police interrogation. When asked why Harlem loved him despite his crimes, Bumpy replied, "Because I never forgot where I came from. I take care of my people, something the government has never done." It was raw, it was defiant, and it summed up the paradox of Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy's life was a constant war. He fought the Italian Mafia. He fought corrupt cops who wanted him gone. He even fought within Harlem, rivals who sought to take his throne. But perhaps his biggest battle was against time.
The world was changing. The Harlem Renaissance was fading, and a new epidemic was rising: heroin. Bumpy despised the drug trade. He knew it would destroy Harlem, yet even he could not stop its spread.
This inner conflict haunted him until the very end. To Harlem, Bumpy Johnson was more than a gangster. He was a protector, a symbol of resistance against racial oppression, and a man who balanced crime with compassion. While history books branded him a mob boss, the streets remembered him as someone who gave them hope when society ignored them. He became a legend, the kind of figure who blurs the line between villain and hero. On July 7th, 1968, at the age of 62, Bumpy Johnson collapsed while eating at Wells Restaurant in Harlem. A heart attack claimed his life instantly. The news spread like wildfire. Crowds filled the streets. Harlem wept. Even rival gangsters came to pay their respects. At his funeral, thousands gathered, some out of fear, but most out of love. For better or worse, the Godfather of Harlem was gone, but his legend would never die. In the end, Bumpy Johnson's life was a story of power, pain, and paradox. He was a king without a crown, a gangster with a conscience, a man whose shadow stretched far beyond Harlem's streets. Perhaps his most haunting words came years before his death. A man's legacy ain't the money he made, it's the lives he touched. And if I go down tomorrow, at least Harlem will know I stood for them. And that is why even today, Harlem still whispers his name, Bumpy Johnson, the Godfather of Harlem, a man whose story will never fade into silence.